Welcome back to the Dortmund Politics Podcast. My name is Justin Fisher.
I'm Nolan Flaherty.
And I'm Austin Vertine. We would be remiss to not start out with this topic to begin our podcast today. Universal outrage has spanned from all areas of the political spectrum this week as video footage has been released of the illegal immigrant child detention facilities that have been put into place by the Trump administration. He has used this in a way to gain leverage to get funding for his border wall as well. That is something he said this week. So I want to get from you guys, Nolan and Justin, your initial thoughts on this new policy.
So obviously this goes along with the Trump administration's policy of zero tolerance at the southern border. So essentially it's about deporting anyone that illegally enters the country. So essentially the problem that I have with this is the inaccuracy in reporting. So obviously I do not like to see these immigrant children being forced to come into this country by these parents. And then being separated from their parents. Clearly not fair to the children, okay? Their parents are probably escaping to achieve asylum, right? They're probably trying to be the best parents that they could be. It's clearly not the child's fault. So it's something that I definitely don't like to see. But what I do not like is the inaccuracy of the reporting. So what we see is that actually if you're an illegal immigrant and you illegally enter the country, then the immigrant agent who detains the family is two choices. Okay, they can either release the family as a whole into the society, okay, or they can detain the child and arrest the parent separately. That was something that was decided, I think, by the Ninth Court of Appeals. So clearly something is wrong with that, but it's not something that was put in place by the Trump administration, but actually the Ninth Court of Appeals. So those are the two choices. So clearly with the zero tolerance policy, and I think this is something that you and I could support, is that we don't want just immediately to put these families back into the street. We want some sort of vetting process for the illegal immigrants that are coming into the country. But what I just don't like to see is the inaccuracy of reporting.
I would like to see the Trump administration take steps to remedify this situation. I mean, it is the Ninth Court of Appeals' fault that the children are being separated from the parents. However, I think Trump is using it to his advantage. I find it interesting that this sort of administration would not value the lives of children, especially with the pro-life campaigns that they put out. Mm-hmm. And I'm like you. I agree that I think the sack of cells that the left thinks is not a child is a child, and I think it's a life. That's another conversation. But I think it's interesting to see that we need to see those aspects of a pro-life argument in an immigration debate.
Don't just be pro-life in the ER.
Absolutely. Be
pro-life
when the kid is actually out on the streets.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we're not seeing right now. And you're definitely right in saying that it's not the administration's fault that the separation has happened between the parent and children. But it's sort of interesting when you see that Trump's motivations, that he's wanting this money for the border wall. He's getting so pissed off that his own Republicans won't fund this wall for him, that he's sort of using this leverage in his advantage. I think I'd like to get your perspective on it as well, Austin. So what are you thinking about it right now?
I think it's plain and simple an ethical crisis in our country. I think it's pretty much common knowledge that most laws that are in place, most laws are ethical. Mm-hmm. If you drive drunk, you're going to get punished. If you rob a bank, you're going to get punished. These are things that are just naturally ethical. But a law that's put in place, that it's not even really a law. It's being used now by the Trump administration. This law that was reinforced by the Ninth Circuit District Court. I think that we have to separate what is ethical and what is law sometimes, because if we were to justify everything as we're just using the rule of law, which has been the primary justification for this policy, is that this is simply the rule of law. That means we're justifying throughout history the rule of law when it came to the Trail of Tears for Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
That was a law that was put into place,
Mm-hmm.
right? Certainly not ethical. Are we justifying the Holocaust, Justin?
Okay.
That was a law that was several laws put into place.
I agree with you on the point that you're making, that it's the rule of law being the primary focus, the primary argument for why they're detaining children. I do not like the comparisons, not just made by you. I mean, this is a comparison that we see all over Twitter, made by the left and media. The comparison between detaining children, separating children from their parents in 2018 to the Holocaust, right? Separating children from their parents in the Holocaust was vastly different than separating children now in 2018. Okay, if you're separating a child from a mother in the Holocaust, you would kill the child, and then most of the time you'd also gas the mother. Okay, in 2018, when you separate the child, you're detaining the child. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to detain the child for more than 3 days, right? It's not a comparable situation. Like the idea that gassing a child is equivalent to detaining a child who illegally entered the country for 3 days. It's just not fair. But it definitely doesn't make this detaining children okay. But what we see is that the Republicans are working to fix this. This isn't just the Democrats going up against the president. It's actually kind of the Republicans and Democrats working with the president actually to solve this issue. But what I don't like is that we see Attorney General Jeff Sessions and we see President Donald Trump that look at these children almost as a deterrent for future illegal immigration. Jeff Sessions is actually quoted in saying that, yes, we'd like to see this as a deterrent, meaning that if you're illegally going to enter this country, we'll detain your children. Like, that's not okay. No. And then the President Donald Trump saying this is a political pawn, right? But clearly the Republicans are trying to fix this with legislation proposed by Ted Cruz. So I think the legislation, it doubled the amount of federal immigration judges. And then it also detained the family and child together, right? So that means the families aren't separated. That means if we want to grant them asylum, we have a certain amount to do it. And he also gives a maximum of 14 days to allow that. So they're going to be detained for no more than 14 days if they illegally enter the country. But the other thing that I don't like that's inaccurate is this idea that every single person who's being detained and being separated from their family is seeking asylum. And while that's true, and we see incredibly high rates of crime in Mexico and South America, and a lot of these families are honestly being good parents by bringing their child here, it's not all the time that these illegal immigrants are seeking asylum by illegally entering the country. If you actually wanted to seek asylum, you would go to a legal point of entry at the border, and you would apply for asylum. But a lot of these people aren't doing that, and they're illegally entering the country, and because of that they eventually get detained.
I think it's definitely a good point to bring up that there are some particular outsiders that might be coming in that aren't necessarily looking for the best interests of their family, and those people I think should be detained. But that goes back to the citizen process being so hard, in that it takes so long for a Mexican trying to become an American in the United States. A lot of these people just want to. A lot of the people that you're talking about might be people that are just looking to come over for a job. I know I work at a local retail, JCPenney, and I've become really friends with this guy named Manuel who I work with at the store, and he only speaks Spanish. I don't know his legal status. I don't know. I think he's on a visa.
Okay.
But he's one guy that he goes back and forth between the United States and Mexico, working at JCPenney in Montgomery, Illinois, because his family lives in Mexico, and he can't get them citizenship to come over and live in the United States. And that's this one particular case that sticks hard with me in my mind, at least when I think about this issue. It's because it's someone I see on the daily working his ass off, but can't get the citizenship that he needs, and it sort of brings up an issue as to, like, what are we going to do with these people at the border? Who are the right people to grant citizenship to? It's such a long process, and it's entangled in so many different ways and scenarios that like within our country. So
we also have to take into account that many of the things that I referenced earlier, when we're talking about the Trail of Tears, when we're talking about the Columbian Exchange, when we're talking about even the Holocaust, we have the luxury of hindsight that we can look at, right? But we should use that as a luxury, because if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And I know we're in the very early stages of this, but
we should stop it in its tracks before it develops.
it could develop into something that we look back in 20 years and think our country that like this is going to be a national shame.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more plausible to compare it to like internment camps and like with the Japanese Americans.
Absolutely.
I would no.
Which is a
I don't
national
think
It's something
No,
that
that is
you look back on it and you see.
no, because
It's,
I mean,
it's,
those,
years ago.
it's out of irrational fear.
but
Yes.
those Japanese Americans were citizens. These people are not citizens and are illegally entering the country.
Not all the Japanese Americans were citizens. I think it was some of the people that had immigrated over, and there was a fear that it's sort of the same thing that's hysteria that went on with 9/11. But there was a fear that these people were going to come into our country and they could gain intel. They could be a threat to us, and it's sort of the same thing.
I think
but
it was drastically worse.
I think
in
being
Japanese internment
being a
camps than it is now.
citizen or not being a citizen, I think that doesn't matter. It's regardless of whether somebody's a citizen or not a citizen. That doesn't make an atrocity worse or better.
I'm not even talking about citizenship. I'm talking about those Japanese Americans were literally Americans. They were citizens. A lot of them were actually born here, right? So what we see is that we're interning Japanese Americans specifically just for having Japanese descent. But these illegal immigrants are not born here, and they're illegally entering the country. They're breaking American laws. So I don't see a fair comparison between.
This is the rule of law, here, that we're using. This is a way to perpetrate this policy that is clearly inhumane and an ethical dilemma.
I agree with you. It's not a fair comparison to compare the detainment of illegal immigrants to Japanese Americans.
I think it's absolutely fair, and I think that when we start to try and rank atrocities, like one is just worse than another, I think that's where we fall into a trap.
I disagree. Okay. I think you should absolutely be rating atrocities.
I think an atrocity is an atrocity either way, and I think that ranking them gets you absolutely nowhere.